Hello, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome to the Nintendo Select Podcast, a weekly Nintendo Switch retrospective and nostalgia podcast where we talk about our favorite Nintendo Switch memories. Hosted by me, Tucker Hazell.
And me, Charlie Wacholz.
This week, we're returning to our series breaking down each year of the Switch's life cycle one by one with our ultimate goal to decide which year of Switch was truly the best. Today's focus is set on 2018, the second year Switch was on the market, and an odd one to talk about. We're joined by someone who can help us by taking a serious look at 2018, friend of the show, infrequent BLB collaborator, Jon Cartwright from Good Vibes Gaming. It is a honor, privilege, and pleasure to have you here, good sir.
Well, it's a delight to be here. I forgot to set my lighting up, so I'm in Xbox 360 filter mode right now. But
you know what? Sometimes it happens. It happens to the best of us. But Jon, you have been covering Switch professionally for as long as it's been out, and so you have quite an insight into the early days of the Switch, and where Charlie and I were a little bit too young to do that. Now we're not calling you ancient or anything, but you have the details. You have the insider knowledge to tell us what it was like covering Switch in 2018 and in those early days. And so I'm excited to break down 2018 because I was thinking through the year and writing down a bunch of bullet points, and just a lot of different topics come to mind. Like, oh, that's kind of interesting. That'll be kind of fun to talk about. And together, they paint a very odd picture of a year that I'm excited to break down. But do you want to talk a little about yourself? I'm sorry, I didn't give you time to introduce who you are and what your channel and job is, I guess.
all you've got to know is that I live in a yellow filter world. There's nothing more about me. No, my name's Jon. I work at GVG, where we cover the gaming scape, mostly Nintendo. Yeah. But I also do acting on the side. I've got a game shipping in like 2 weeks. That's Cat Quest 3, which is a very cool one. Hitting Switch, Xbox, PC, PlayStation. There's other stuff. There's Project
I'll be able to
Tides,
hear your voice out of my Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, I'm going to come out the speakers. And that was my goal.
But Jon, no, you're in there. Get up.
I wasn't sure I'd hit it either because I didn't know when the Switch successor was going to launch. But when I started doing acting, I was like, the first thing I want to do is come out of a Switch speaker. Yeah. And just about fulfilling that before the successor is announced. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Congrats.
that's very exciting.
Yeah, that's basically me. I talk into microphones, whether it's about games or for games.
Yes. Great. Now, let's shift our focus to 2018. Charlie, since Jon just introduced himself, I don't want to let all the power go to his head, you know. Let's turn to you. What are your thoughts on 2018 as a whole? Let's start with high-level thoughts.
So I think just looking at it overall, it has a bit of a reputation, I feel like, in the online discourse for being this very kind of top-heavy year where it is all of the big banger first-party titles, unless it is a re-release or something of that or a DLC or something of that nature, being kind of top-heavy in bottom-heavy.
Yeah.
At the end of the year, right? You have
2018's got a huge ass.
And you've got, Fire Emblem in July as well, which is a pretty
No,
big
that's 2019.
One. But
sorry about it. Hey, why don't you take a look at that very handy and convenient dated list of every Nintendo published game from 2018 I included in our Google Doc.
You're so right. Well, on that front, I mean, like, essentially it is mostly dry aside from like Donkey Kong and Octopath until later on in the year, right? But for me, it was very much the year that like I started playing non-Nintendo games on a Nintendo console for the first time. Like I don't know, I grew up during the Wii era and I pretty much only had like Wii Sports, Mario Galaxy, and Smash. And then, Wii U era, there were very few games to play on that console that weren't Nintendo games and in general. And then, during the Switch era, this was really like my first foray into playing stuff like Doom, Wolfenstein, just a ton of indies too. Like I Celeste, Into the Breach, all these like just banger after banger in terms of like third party and indie games in a way that I think really highlighted the changes in Nintendo's strategy. I'm curious to see how y'all feel about that though, because I know like some people are very into that like very indie and third party focused take, and some people are not.
Jon, what are your thoughts?
It definitely depends what you're into, because I remember I was far more positive about this year than most people in that moment.
Okay.
Because for most of 2018, there aren't many Nintendo games to play, at least original ones. It was very much Smash and Pokemon. That was those were kind of the highlights.
In November and December.
Yeah, so you went through the year without much really new. But I guess if you compare that to the previous year, which was like Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, Splatoon 2, like it does feel small. But there were also a lot of other different games out there. It was when third parties started taking the system seriously. So when the Switch first came out, most third parties were not on board. No one knew it was going to be a success. And so we started getting lots of pretty high-profile ports. And indies just flooded to the system, like you were saying just now. So if you played more than Nintendo, then I think this was actually a really good year. And there were some cool evergreens in there too, which we'll talk about soon. But yeah, overall, like, it's definitely not the best year, but I think it's a pretty well-rounded one if you don't just rely on Nintendo.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think what's interesting for me is I think I'm going to be the most negative one here about this year, because I do, especially when talking about a year of a system from a first-party developer, I do rely pretty heavily in my mind on what was the cadence, even if it's not games I loved, what was the cadence of those first-party, second-party published releases. And what this year shows is that Nintendo was very prepared to have a very killer 2017, but they very clearly were more prepared to launch the system than to continue that momentum forward. And I feel like that definitely didn't kill my interest in Switch in 2018. There were a few games that I liked that certainly came later in the year, but for me, the reliance on ports and some second-party published games, and then some other things like Labo that we can talk about, this year feels kind of slapdash to me, and especially in, I would say, a really imbalanced release calendar with the three biggest selling games and most original games for the system coming in October, November, and December, obviously very late into the year, and then a couple other things like two Nintendo published games released on the same day, and then there were 3 in May, and so it's very clear to me that Nintendo had put so much effort into 2017 that they kind of forgot to maintain that focus going into 2018, where there's not a Nintendo published game until March. That has not happened again since 2018. There's always been some sort of January, February game. They almost never have games releasing on the same day anymore. They almost never have more than 1 or 2 games releasing in any given month. And so that really does weigh heavily on my thoughts on this year. Because even the games that were ports in a couple of the original games, like we're going to talk about Mario Tennis Aces and Kirby Star Allies and Labo, it's not like there was nothing. But I don't love almost any game from this year, except for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And of course, we can all relate to that. That seems to be a cultural known quantity. But this is really the only game that I played on Switch that I'm like incredibly passionate about. There are a couple indie games mostly that I also really enjoyed, but one game that I love is it's a rarity for Switch, because Switch years usually have 2 or 3, if not more, games that become sort of all-timers for me and I've become particularly passionate about. And so
especially
this year lacking
especially
that.
Among the Nintendo first party,
yeah, definitely.
right?
Yeah. So sorry to bring the mood down, but we're here to speak our truth on Nintendo Switch's 2018. And so I do want to make sure we're balancing between talking about the Nintendo side of the equation, which I think we can all admit, which is at least weird, and it definitely had some strange patches that we'll talk about. But I'm more than willing to allow for the positivity to flow and be like, hey, still, if you take a look at this in a holistic sense with ports, third-party ports, re-releases, indie games, there was a lot to play on the system. So it's a year of 2 years in an interesting way, I think.
It's interesting how we perceive this, because like this year right now, Nintendo are scheduled to have around 12 first-party games ship.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at this year, like there are more, but the key ones
Yes.
are Smash and
Yes.
Pokemon, which are like huge IPs. But if you were to look at like PlayStation or Xbox, shipping 2 major games a year, it's like that's pretty normal for them.
Yeah.
That's just kind of a regular year.
Yeah.
Obviously, they have more of a third-party crutch than Nintendo do. It's just funny how we can look at that.
Definitely. Well, no, just similar also for sales. Like you talk about like Super Mario Party, which is a game that is well received and is reasonably popular with like the general populace. This game sold what? 17, 18
I think it's
million
like 20
copies, something
million
like
at
that?
this
Yeah,
point.
20 million copies. which is more than almost any other Xbox or Sony game has ever sold. And
Yeah.
so we grade on a curve when it comes to Nintendo, and I think we especially grade on a curve when it comes to Nintendo Switch, where this year, not having the consistent release cadence, not having multiple tentpole titles spread out across the course of the year, makes it really stand out. I mean, you talk about 2017, then you go to 2019, it's like 2018 definitely is definitely a sag in between those. Charlie?
It is a sag, but also like I don't know. This was the year of Smash hype.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
like it's hard. It's easy to like look back in hindsight and be like, oh, like this year didn't have a whole lot, But then, we had so many different events, so many different moments where even when Nintendo maybe wasn't giving the like hardcore dedicated audience the 2017 level of banger after banger, I think that it was catering to that audience in a different way. We had something almost from the beginning of the year. I mean, Smash was announced in March, and at the very beginning of March, no less. And so for almost the entire year, we had something to look forward to from Nintendo, to the point where like we could be watching the Game Awards and Joker pops up at it, right? There are different events and different things happening. We have different demos and stuff like that. And obviously, like, again, like no one game is like going to carry a specific year in these discussions, I think.
Well, 2020 might have something to say about that.
That's true. But I mean, I think Smash is similar to Animal Crossing, but in a different way. Smash's kind of all-consuming presence in this discussion really does really did at the time propel the hype and the discussion forward in a way. Like I remember Tucker, you and I were in high school when this was happening, and like I remember so many people like who I didn't even know like played video games were like, yeah, I just got a Switch because Smash is coming out soon. And I'm like, oh my god, this is the hype that is around especially this entry of this series for some reason is unbelievable. And I think you saw that a lot reflected in a lot of the like content and stuff that was made. And actually, John, that's why Tucker and I talked about having you on this episode, was because when you were at Game Explain, y'all were doing a lot of those weekly Smash videos and stuff like that. And I remember listening to those while I was like packing before moving off to school and stuff like that, just like for months on end, listening to y'all talk about that stuff. And so I'm really curious about your kind of perspective on that, being able to stretch sometimes crumbs into what sometimes became an hour-long discussion.
Definitely crumbs with this game. Like the gist of it is everyone's here. Most of the stages are back. Every character is back, and so it's hard to get much content out of that, to be honest, because it's mostly a known quantity. But that's kind of what made the hype so huge, though, because there's a small amount of room for new stuff. It exploded with the DLC, both the Fighters Pack 1 and Fighters Pass 2, but in the base game, there's only a few actual new characters, and that really ignited the hype because it made it like a small gate. So who could it possibly be? And so it was kind of exciting to always wonder and infight about this game. Some people made certain characters their entire personality, and then they were crushed when they didn't get in. But there's just this moment of just when a cool character was announced, like everyone just sort of came together in a way that I don't think we ever really see in this industry. I remember when we were in the E3 media room at one point during the Direct when Banjo was announced. And this was usually a really respectful room, just quiet. Everyone's just doing their work. No one's making a peep. But the moment Banjo was announced, there's just this roar of journalists. And it was just a surreal moment. And then going out to the show floor and just seeing everybody else being like, did you see Banjo out there? Like, it was nuts. But yeah, Smash wasn't even like, fast forwarding to today, I still play Smash, but it's not the only evergreen from this year that I'm still playing.
Oh, okay.
I think I'm an oddity in this regard, but
all right.
I loved, and I still love, Mario Tennis Aces.
Oh, yeah.
Still playing that today. And when you go online, you can always spy on people who you've played with and see how long they've played the game for, which I do if I lose very badly. And there's a lot of people out there who've been playing for the game for like 4,000 hours. Yeah. It's got a crazy amount of depth. It's often just shrugged off for having like very little content, which I'm not going to argue against, that the single player content isn't great. But the online depth is endless. It's just all these mind games, and the base mechanics are just so good. So
Yeah.
I'm still sticking with that game today, and it's one of my favorites of this year.
That's an interesting one to
Yeah,
sort of start with
I think
because both Mario Tennis Aces and Kirby Star Allies, those are the two big original, more core, not Labo titles from the first half of the year. And those two games, I think, get they play a very interesting role in talking about Nintendo Switch's 2018 because both those games have I would say, currently unfair stink about them. People didn't like them when they came out because they launched content light, but both of those games got very substantial post-launch updates that brought them to much more complete experiences, adding missions, adding more characters, adding more maps to something like Aces, lots of Dream Friends, lots of challenge levels, lots of post-launch stuff or post-game stuff for Kirby Star Allies. Mario Tennis Aces was a game that, coming off the heels of Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, is just obviously leagues better. It looks better, has more interesting mechanics. The map variety is an incredible step up. But because it wasn't the full game at launch, I think a lot of people still look back at it and be like, oh, that was just one of those lazy, quick, Nintendo just like pushed it out kind of games. But because it had a lot of post-launch support, it now, if you go and play that game, it's all free. You don't have to buy any of it. You have a very complete Mario Tennis experience that, to your point, obviously you're an example of this, but people still quite consistently play, which is really, really cool.
It's a quiet community. There aren't that many people on social media being like, oh, you've got to play Aces, but there's a quiet bunch out there still playing it. And I think it's one of the best Mario rosters ever. Like, just that character roster is incredibly good. There's like no filler. You've got all these characters that debuted for the first time in like a sports game. Like Pauline is back in here. You got like Chain Chomp. There's some really cool.
Oh yeah, Chain Chomp is so much fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a second mode which is like a boring mode that strips out all of the time meter mechanics. And when you strip them out, it's just Ultra Smash. Like they have basically taken that poor game and they've made something way better out of it just by layering on all of these skill mechanics. And yeah, like, to be honest, it is one of my favorite Mario sports games, and it gets a really bad reputation. But I think if more people just sat down and played it, that that would change their mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this is a great example of where like fandom and and like a company or developer's vision for what they want a new entry in a game to be just like completely different. I think the Paper Mario series, having admittedly not played a single Paper Mario game in the past, I think the Paper Mario series runs into the same thing where the fans expect a very specific thing and they do not get that very specific thing. And so then they don't see the forest for the trees sometimes when the thing that they get is very good. It's just maybe not good in the way that they want it to be, right? And that's not to say that like every Paper Mario game is stellar, because again, I have not played them. But I know that there are like, especially with Tennis Aces, like I think that game really has some sauce. Like it absolutely is one of those games where, especially from a multiplayer standpoint, is one of Nintendo's best games of the Switch era, probably. At least, again, strictly multiplayer speaking.
In terms of content, it definitely falls short, but multiplayer's endless. You know, you can just the variety of different people you play with it just keeps going.
I had a friend a few years ago who basically only had a Switch to play Aces. Like he had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours in it, and yeah, okay, I'm sure he had Mario Kart, I'm sure he had Smash or Pokemon or whatever, but it's definitely a game that speaks very specifically to people, and I think that actually can be something that's said for a good amount of the not main three titles from this year. The main three titles being Super Mario Party, Pokemon Let's Go, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. These three games sold 10+ million copies. Are some of them are, you know, there's popular, well-received games that a lot of people like. But when you get to the level below that, and you talk about the ports that we're certainly going to get into, we talk about something like Aces, like Star Allies, like Octopath Traveler, like the remake of The World Ends With You, like certainly not Go Vacation, but we can mention it anyway. There's a layer of these games that speak very passionately to their fan base, but for the most part, these games that we're talking about are niche games, and the reason why I start off this video saying the release cadence is imbalanced, the year feels a little bit odd, is because it's not the greatest idea to fill 9 months of your year with games that speak very specifically to niche audiences and aren't the ones selling 5-10 million copies. You usually see a better space or spread of. But yeah, I mean, obviously talking about aces, people care a lot about a lot of these games.
Yeah. What's cool about many of the games you mentioned too is it shows Switch as both a console and a handheld, which I don't think 2017 really did. That year, it was like, take these console games where you want to go. Whereas this year, you get Kirby Star Allies. We hadn't had a side-scrolling Kirby since the Wii. And this game was like, it's pretty, it looks nice, but it's definitely very 3DS coded in many ways.
Totally.
And so it was nice to get stuff like that and World Ends With You and even Pokemon on a console for the first time.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge Star Allies defender. I think it's okay. It definitely got more exciting with updates. But for me, it's just kind of a vanilla-ish Kirby.
So I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on Kirby, Charlie? I don't know if we've ever talked about Kirby. I have no idea what you think about that series, about that guy.
I like Kirby. I think Forgotten Land is incredible. I love Robobot, but I can't say that I'm a diehard Kirby. There's just specific ones that I really like.
Yeah, Charlie.
Yeah, I like Kirby as a franchise. Like, I think Kirby NES is like probably one of the better, at least in terms of like games that have aged well from the NES. I think that is like one of the best aged games. I know that isn't the original version of that game, but I would argue it's the much better version of it. Superstar is great. I love Forgotten Land. I do not like Star Allies. I found that game horrendously bland. I gave it a shot so many times, and I just did not like it.
It's fine.
Really at all.
Robobot's a really, really good Kirby, and coming down from that, it just felt like a downgrade in most ways. It's okay, but
Yeah, it almost feels like it's from a different era of Nintendo in the sense that like a lot of the Switch is not leaning into any specific gimmick, but Star Allies is very specifically leaning into the fact that the Switch comes with multiple controllers out of the box.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And that game is marginally more fun playing it with other people. Marginally.
Yes.
But it is. Yeah, so we talk about Star Allies, we talk about Aces. I want to talk a little bit about the ports of this year, because I feel like when I think about this year, outside of Smash, that's kind of the thing that dominates my mindset. It's funny, there are only 3 Wii U ports this year. It's Tropical Freeze, featuring new funky mode, Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, and that's it. But the interesting thing is, I feel like those games weigh quite heavily on what people think about like early Switch era, because there was a lot of conversation, and there still is to some degree, of, oh my god, Nintendo just cheesing the Wii U library, like relying so heavily on games they already made. If you were a Wii U fan, there was nothing to play. And I think that's the most true that ever was the first 8 months of 2018, because Tropical Freeze, Hyrule Warriors, and Captain Toad were all presented as full price or close to full price major releases, and in some cases it was the only games that came out in that specific month. And so which is something that doesn't usually happen anymore, and if it is a re-release of a game, it's usually a remake now of things like we've gotten recently, Thousand Year Door and Mario RPG and things like that. But Tropical Freeze, Hyrule Warriors, Captain Toad, this is where I played all of those games. I like to love all of those games. I'm very, very happy that they're on this platform, but it's very interesting that there was sort of a condensed focus on those games being the quote-unquote major releases of there was a season of Nintendo Switch where if you were a Wii U owner that had played the Nintendo games, there was very little to do, and I can understand that definitely being something that was frustrating to people. But yeah, what do you guys think about the reliance on ports this year with 3?
I want to say that Bayonetta 1 and 2 were also this year. Is that right?
Oh, that's right. Yes, early in that year. Yeah.
Very like January 18th or something like that. It was like the first week of business, basically, that they could
It's
sell
interesting.
something.
Some of them are quite basic. Like Tropical Freeze is one of the best games on the platform, but the port itself is just kind of adding like an easy mode, and that's pretty much it. Although funky mode is hilarious. But then you got like Hyrule Warriors, which is actually a really ambitious port, because Legends on 3DS added a ton. Like it let you manually sort of say where you want your allies to go without pausing the game and taking control of them. That's a big feature. But then there's also a bunch of new characters and a bunch of new levels that were stuck on 3DS. So putting all that stuff with like Wii U quality visuals, that was a big deal. And Captain Toad had like a 2-player mode. It had all these new levels. It had even had DLC and like Labo VR support later on. So like these were good ports and great games. But I can see like after like Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild, it isn't the same, banger after banger approach as the previous year.
You come off of that and you're like, this is Koei Tecmo, this is the third time you've shown Hyrule Warriors in the last 4 years.
I also think that, like, in hindsight, especially with Tropical Freeze and Bayonetta, and maybe I forget when Hyrule Warriors on Switch came out, but I know at least for Tropical Freeze,
if only
and Bayonetta,
there was some sort of dated list of every Nintendo published game.
I was gonna say it was this day today, but no, we're not in May anymore. We're in July.
Oh,
July 18th.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. May of 2018 had both Tropical Freeze and Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition. Those both released that month.
And Pokemon Quest.
And Pokemon Quest, which we'll talk about.
Pokemon Quest.
But yeah, get back to Hyrule Warriors, Charlie. The floor is yours.
I was actually making a point that was wildly incorrect because I was looking at the wrong place with dates.
Fair enough. Do you want to shift your point?
Well, no. So my original point was going to be like, I think it's easy to look at, especially in that era, to have that discussion when, there are a lot of unknowns, right? All these games came out before we knew whether or not Smash Ultimate was going to be a port, and I think that is like, with the hindsight of how much discussion there was around whether or not Ultimate would end up being a port of Smash 4 or not, which, looking back, very, very wild that we even like considered that. But like, we all did, like, or not all, but like a lot of people really did think that. I totally did. And especially with these 3 ports back to back to back, it's like, I understand why that discussion was happening so much, because it was such a heavy reliance on it.
I think you also have to call into conversation the fact that the announcement cadence for games this year was very different from the announcement cadence for games for 2017. In 2017, we knew almost every game that was coming as of January. With the January Switch presentation, you're like, okay, we have the cadence for this year. We know Mario's on the way. We know ARMS on the way. Splatoon, Xenoblade, Fire Emblem Warriors. They totally blew their load in it, but it worked for them, and it worked for 2017, and it made it so there was no worry. Then you go into 2018, you're like, okay, Kirby and Mario Tennis. Okay, that's fine. It's in ports. That's fine. But none of the, outside of Smash, which again, you're right, the conversation was, is this going to be a port? Especially in the context of when they had just been porting a bunch of other Wii U games, it totally makes sense why someone would be a little bit worried or confused or concerned that it might just be a simple port. But also, the other 2 major games that released that holiday season in Mario Party and Let's Go, those were not announced until June and July. And so you were waiting 6 months into the year with nothing slated for the second half of the year, except for what at the time was maybe a port of Smash 4, which would have been still a great game, and people probably wouldn't have complained too much. But the unknown quantity, I think, definitely weighed on people quite a bit, because so much of the Switch lifecycle, we've always had these games that were announced like super far in advance. Like, okay, so we know these are coming. We know these are coming. But in 2018, outside of the ones that released in the first half of the year that you knew were dated, it was like, now you're just waiting for, like, Yoshi.
Yeah.
It wasn't even called Crafted World at the time. It was, you just knew it as Yoshi. Like, that was really the only thing that we knew. And I guess Bayonetta 3, obviously that wouldn't happen for years. But I think it was really a problem. And I think this really hurt the perception of 2018 of the fact that the announcement cadence was really, really strange, and left people wondering for 6 to 7 months of the year, is there going to be any major new releases for the system?
I think one thing that's been lost to time a little bit, just in general, is that like portable versions of console games was still a really big thing then. Like, you look online now, and the narrative is like Switch launched as this underpowered 2015 tablet hardware. It was always bad. It was super impressive to play games like Dark Souls on the go for the first time, which you could do on the Switch in this year. And there were numerous like big games like that. Okami HD was another really cool one. Like, finally having that on a portable.
Yeah, that March Direct was full of third-party ports. The Crash games were announced there. Undertale was announced there. South Park was announced there. They just went boom, boom, boom. Hey, all these great games from other systems are coming. Of course, they're old, but there was absolutely the excitement factor. And I remember watching that direct and be like, this is one of the best directs ever. They back-to-back announced Crash Bandicoot ports. Crash had never been on a Nintendo system for a long time. Undertale, Okami, oh my god, Smash, it's like losing my mind.
If it were like the 3DS or the Vita,
Yeah.
that would be huge. I think it's just that
Yeah.
a lot of people see the Switch as a console, that it isn't as big a deal, I guess, in your mind. But
Yeah.
still having all these games on the go was so cool.
And I think that really points to, I think, one of the running narratives, at least for me, of this podcast in general, which is that, like, I think the Switch is kind of the culmination in a lot of ways of games up to the point in which it came out in a lot of ways, and not just Nintendo games, but like I think you have this like surprising concentration of the best games that aren't made by Nintendo ever made, most of which are on Switch now. And 2018 really was kind of the start of that really becoming a thing. I mean, now we have every single Doom game playable on Switch. How wild is that? Like, that you wouldn't have even expected a single one of them in the Wii U or 3DS era, right? And I don't know. I think those, especially that March Direct with all of its third-party ports, just really set it up to have that kind of titanic, all-encompassing, for all intents and purposes, all-encompassing library that we have today. I mean, and not to mention, you know, you have that E3 Direct, right? And Smash was most of that, but you had some really great shadow drops with Shovel Knight, or not Shovel Knight,
Hollow Knight.
Fortnite and Hollow Knight.
2 nights.
Two nights.
And
Yeah.
yes, the 2 nights. And I don't know. I just think that the Switch 2018 may not have been as good as 2017, but again, like, it shows Nintendo's like new commitment to, oh, we're going all in on this. Like, we're putting all of our eggs in one basket, and this is what that looks like.
And Hollow Knight, for a lot of people, is a top 10 Switch game. And there's quite a few of those in this year. Like, for me, Aces is one of my favorite Switch games. Smash is one of my favorite Switch games. Hollow Knight is one of my favorite Switch games. It's full of them, both new and old.
Celeste?
Yeah, Celeste is definitely a big
of
one,
course, yeah.
Yeah, and what's actually interesting about Celeste, and I think I'm remembering this correctly, this 2018 is the only year in the Switch era, I believe, in which there was not a Switch exclusive game that was like in the Game of the Year conversation. Now, of course, Smash Ultimate released that year, and
That's
then,
right.
especially for TGAs, would be nominated the next year in 2019 because it missed the cutoff date. But Celeste is, I think, the only game playable on Switch from 2018 that was nominated for Game of the Year, and I think that also contributes a little bit, or is
Cuphead.
reflective. Well, no, Cuphead wasn't
Right.
available. When was it?
And
released?
Hollow Knight
Oh,
released
yeah,
on
you're
PC
right.
the
Well,
prior
but also-
year, so it didn't qualify.
Cuphead was
as a new
number
game.
one. Cuphead was not released in 2018 and it wasn't nominated for Game of
Yeah,
the Year.
you're right.
Period.
It was 2019,
So,
right?
no.
That was the like indie direct or something.
Oh yes,
like
yes,
that.
yes.
But
The
you
next
are
year.
right. There's a pretty big sprawl of old stuff and some great new stuff, but very few of them have the broad appeal of being Game of the Year worthy.
Yeah.
One smaller one that I really liked, and this is a port again, is Dragon Quest Builders. That was previously on PS4 and
sure.
Vita. I gave the PS4 version a go, but didn't get very far. But just the flexibility of the Switch just allowed me to finish that game, and I adore it. I adore both it and its sequel, which came the year after. Switch just became a Dragon Quest machine, and Builders was just a really cool game that you can chip away at for a long time. I wasn't really feeling a lull of games because I had all this other stuff, especially just these long-term ones like Tennis and Builders.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about 2018, I think one thing that goes overlooked is that this is maybe the strongest year that the bond between Nintendo and Square Enix ever was. They published Dragon Quest Builders on Switch. They published Octopath Traveler, and they published The World Ends With You Final Remix. That is 3 games of different genres that appeal to that specific sort of more JRPG fan base, but 3 games in 1 year really builds out a library and builds a relationship in a way that was continued forward. Nintendo would then publish things like Bravely Default, and they would publish did they publish Triangle Strategy?
I think they did.
Live like there's a few that like scatter out across the course, but like that is a crazy bond, publishing 3 games in 1 year.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that also the year that Square brought all of the Final Fantasy games to Switch, basically?
That's
Not all of them,
question.
but
That sounds
like
right.
something like 7 through 12. Because I remember
Which direct was
being
that?
Because I remember John. I remember you nailing that prediction, and people being not normal about it online.
I need to find out when that specific Final Fantasy Direct was. I can't remember off the top of my head.
They sprinkled them out. I think the first one to release, I want to say, was
September 2018 was when they were announced. I think they didn't start coming out until 2019 then. Unless there was like one or two at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But still, that actually goes back to the point we were saying earlier of just Switch, especially in 2018, the idea of having games history so accessible on a powerful piece of portable hardware on a reasonably sized screen, not like the PSP or the Vita that are so much smaller and you have to sort of deal with the fact that you're playing on a smaller screen and weaker hardware. Square went all in on making sure their history was accessible, and back-to-back announcing Chocobo Mystery Dungeon and Final Fantasy 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 12.
It's surreal to say
they
that
mixed
now.
8. They skipped 8.
Because those were always
Yeah.
PlayStation. They were tied to PlayStation Legacy, and just to
Exactly.
have the direct guy go into a serious voice and be like, Final Fantasy 7 is coming to Nintendo Switch. Like, it was mind-blowing.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to shift gears to a game. You mentioned Dragon Quest Builders being like your underrated game, John. And Charlie, if you want, prep whatever your underrated pick from this year is. This is not a game I love, but it's a game that I like a lot more than I think people give it credit for. And that's Sushi Striker Wave
Yeah,
for
hell
Shooting.
yeah. I'm glad someone mentioned
Is
it.
actually
Hell yeah.
a very fun
very
game.
good.
And especially if you're not playing it under the auspices of, oh, this is the big release of that month, which, okay, yeah, from Nintendo it was. There was a time in which it was. And you're able to get a copy. This is a sealed copy of Sushi Striker that I got for $9 new on Amazon.
One of the few Nintendo games to ever drop in price, but it's good.
Yeah.
It's got some good production values. There's like anime cutscenes. It's got a theme song. It's a good game.
It has like an anime whole
yeah.
intro. It's like the main issue with this game is that it is gameplay wise and presentation wise very much in the handheld design philosophy. This is it's a port, although it released the same game. It's a port of a 3DS game that they brought to Switch. And I think it works great on Switch. I love the tactility of sliding your finger, which of course you could also do with the stylus on 3DS. Sliding your finger, connecting all the things, and connecting the sushi and sending them across. It's so original and so weird. And in all honesty, it's one of the few like new character-based IP of the Switch generation, which people seem to forget because they forget this game exists, which is fair enough.
I did until I submitted the list.
But the main issue with this game is that I feel like it straddles an odd line between having the gameplay and visual stylings of a handheld game and wanting to be the scope and presentation value in terms of having cutscenes and voice acting and things of a console game, because this game's like 15 hours long or something to play through the whole campaign, which this gameplay does not hold up for 15 hours. This is a great, like, if this was a 4-hour game that had good replay value and different characters that kind of, you could like spec in to like try different runs or whatever, I think that would make a lot of sense. But as a retail release and as long as it is, it definitely feels a little bit mixed, but it's a good game. You should try it for like $9 if you can get a copy.
I think I played the demo, but isn't the gameplay loop like very clearly designed to be better on 3DS? Like, wasn't that like part of it? Like, it seems like it. I remember thinking, oh, if I play this, I'm probably just going to.
I think it holds up well on the Switch, but 3DS.
Yeah, I know issues.
I think the sort of dual screen mechanic makes a bit more sense because it's clearly meant to be split between them. But in terms of replayability, though, I wasn't good enough to really play online, but I have a friend who was really good, and he's got like hundreds of hours in that game.
You would be the guy to have a friend who's really into Sushi Striker.
There's got to be someone out there, right?
Yeah, always.
But that's definitely my underrated.
Everyone has a favorite Pokemon, as they say.
Charlie, do you have an underrated pick?
Every Pokemon is someone's favorite. Sorry. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I mean, Wolfenstein and Katamari, both of those games. I mean, just like, God. Wolfenstein 2 is especially, like, I think that is still my favorite story in a video game. It is like the combination of Inglourious Bastards and Indiana Jones that I personally want. It is very like felt very catered towards me when I played it, and it was the first time I'd ever really played a game like that. Like, again, like, I didn't really play, like, I had an Xbox 360, but I didn't play the campaigns for any of the games I was playing. I was just playing Call of Duty and Halo Online and then Minecraft, right? And then, you know, I had an Xbox One at the time. I didn't have a PS4 at the time, but like I wasn't playing any of these like higher profile AAA games. And so this was kind of my first AAA experience with a game that wasn't a Nintendo game in a single player sense. And I was blown away by Wolfenstein 2. I mean, and calling it a hidden gem is maybe cheating a little bit because it's published by Bethesda and is like, it's a Wolfenstein game.
And it's a very,
but
very
also
well-rated game. Like, people love that game.
But I don't think I think genuinely, I don't think it's talked about enough. Like, I don't think
you're
enough
right.
people,
The New Order gets
it.
a lot of praise. The New Colossus doesn't so much, and it's genuinely really good. They both feel a lot like Half-Life in many ways, and we don't really get that many shooters like that anymore.
Yeah.
So it's just really rad to have that.
Yeah.
There was also a big technical push for the Switch as well. Like we had Doom prior, but Wolfenstein went even further. And it definitely got a bit blurry in areas, but it was at that stage where it was just impressive to have that kind of thing on a handheld. I really like that too.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, the reason why I'm going to allow you to call that a hidden gem is because people don't really remember that game is on Switch. That was one of the early third-party major IP AAA ports to the system, but it's obviously the inferior version, as you can say, for a lot of those type of games. But I think that is a well-discussed and well-revered game, but the Switch version is not. But it's as you played it on there and loved it, and it's one of your favorite games, it's a totally competent. Actually, Abram did the exact same thing. He played it on Switch, and it's one of his favorite games as well. It's a totally serviceable version of that game, and having that, as impressive as it was, new as it was, on a Nintendo system, that's something that is kind of forgotten time.
I think it's beyond serviceable. I mean, really, the only difference is like lighting and like textures and character models and like frame rate, I guess. But like those things, for the most part, do not take away from the experience. The cutscenes are still in like the full HD because they're all pre-rendered, right? Unless you are deeply concerned about like seeing a fascist blood splatter in HD, you're not missing much by playing the Switch version. Like, it really is like, in a way that a lot of Switch ports, especially later on, are not. It is like shockingly close to parity. And I do think that's partially just because Wolfenstein 2 has such a stellar art direction.
Oh, definitely.
Like,
very colorful.
It's allowed to shine on Switch.
No.
And then Katamari, like, again, hidden gem in the biggest of air quotes, but it is the game that I like. That and What the Golf. I say this all the time on this show. Katamari and What the Golf are the games that I show to people who don't play many video games, because those are, I think, exemplary things that aren't just like Mario, Fortnite, Pokemon, and like Call of Duty, which are the things that people know video games as come from the outside. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So talking about the ports this year that I really enjoyed, I think I also want to shout out Katamari Damacy Reroll. I love that game. I think that is the first time that game specifically was playable on portable hardware, and Katamari works so well on portable hardware. Of course, there were Vita and PSP games that were Katamari games that were portable, but having Katamari Damacy, one of my favorite games of all time, funny enough, that game being announced was the most excited I got in the direct that I was announced. I stood up on my chair. I was like, "Oh my god, are you kidding me? Katamari is coming to Switch! Holy crap!" And I loved that game when I played.
I didn't know what it was.
You didn't? Oh, was that your first time playing it on Switch?
I'd never heard of it until the day I picked it up.
Really? That's
until the day it showed up in the direct, I should say.
Sure, of course.
It wasn't a direct, and I was like, "What the hell is that?" And my roommate was like, "Oh yeah, those games are pretty fun." And then fast forward like 6 months, and it's like one of my favorite games ever made.
Yeah.
Can I shout out something that was really cool this year a moment? And it's something that I think most people forget. But during the Treehouse at E3, Nintendo revealed arcade games from their own library.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff like Donkey Kong
Yeah.
hit for the first time. And until now, Nintendo had only shipped the NES version as re-releases. It was always the NES game. But we finally got the arcade version of DK Jr., even Sky Skipper, which was a game that people thought was lost to time. They found the original arcade machine in their vaults and released the ROM on the eShop. That's super cool stuff. We had stuff like Versus Super Mario Brothers as well before the NES stuff launched, but this was just that was way cooler.
I mean,
that is really cool. I don't think I knew about that.
I think that is just a really good example of, well, again, kind of what we've been talking about, where we can praise this year, even if it's not in the highest profile new releases for the system, the Switch sort of filling out its identity as a games history machine, especially a Nintendo games history machine, which of course has only expanded over the years and has gotten to the point where I would say it's the definitive system to have if you want to get into games history, into Nintendo games history especially. But one thing we can't ignore is this is also the year that Nintendo Switch Online launched. And it launched late in the year, and there are two things that come along with NSO launching. Number one, you now have to pay for online games, to play online games, which was free up until this point, even on that system, which is a very, very weird thing to do. 18 months into the life of your system, just change it to paid.
It was called a trial up
exactly.
until then.
But it really was, oh, God, we don't have this ready yet. Oh, let's figure it out. And so I think it was like September or October of 2018. NSO launches. You now have to pay for your online. Online games, especially first few years of Switch, are notoriously not great. People are very upset by NSO. Like, why am I paying $20 a year for something that barely works? But what it also came with was, I think, 20 at launch NES games.
You're right. It was just
and
20.
Looking back, it is hilarious. It is hilarious that that's where that started with. I mean, they cover most of their main NES bases in that first 20 games, and I certainly was excited for it because while I had played some NES games, having especially some like more obscure and random ones that I didn't have to pay $5 or $6 for individually, was really nice to have those accessible. NSO is a service that I think deserves its own episode at some point to sort of break down the history of it and the evolution and how it's improved over time. But 2018, the launch of NSO is definitely a pro and a con because you can levy at it that that paying for online that still didn't work great was not great. It was being compared, I think rightfully in that time, to Virtual Console, the end of life cycle Wii U Virtual Console, which was very robust and had tons of systems, and NSO with 20 NES games is just a major step down. But also bringing those 20 NES games and starting the very inconsistent, especially near launch, cadence of releasing older games and bringing those to us, starts to build, as we were saying, the Switch as a system for games legacy and lineage and history. And so it's a very, very important part of this year that it is not a problem anymore. But when you think back to 2018, it was a lot of people being like, this is the worst way they could have done this.
Yeah, it was no good. Like, the emulation quality was good. It was
and you
the
could
same
play
as the
the games online. And they also had the NES Joy-Con and things.
Although, like, I don't know if NES games are the best showcase of that, though. Because you got, like, Ice Climber, which is simultaneous, but most of them are just, like, take turns, which is... You may as well not be online for that. But that being said, there was definitely a big thirst for this stuff. Mm-hmm. As we've been saying, like, just having these games on the go is a big deal. And NES games are not a good showcase for that. But when you get to, like, N64 and all these other games, it's just neat to have them on the go. But then, like, we've gotten to a point now where there are these really good games to play with other people, like Pound Upon or Four Swords or any of the Mario Karts.
GoldenEye.
But none of them were here for that. So this was just it was a weird launch, and the wording was weird too, because when they announced this stuff, they said NES and Super Nintendo.
Did they?
But then they quietly never said Super Nintendo again.
Sure, yeah. Until a year later?
We had no roadmap. Like, we didn't even know Super Nintendo was still
I think
coming.
it was September 2019 that they announced SNES games,
I think that's right, yeah.
I think it's also very funny that we talked about this like kind of surprise, very cool release of the Arcade Archives Donkey Kong version, segueing into talking about the NES Online and NSO in general and stuff like that, because I think it really does show that like Nintendo had a plan for 2017 and they did not necessarily have a plan for 2018 because you have a thing that you very famously port, or a thing that you very famously release a very specific version of to sell on many other platforms, and you sell that piecemeal, and then you, like 3 months later, announce a service with a ton of games that are usually sold piecemeal next to that thing that you released, a different version, yes, but a very similar version, a very similar product that you used to release with these games, and just the like the dissonance in between that, and especially dropping the SNES from some of the messaging only to bring it back later. It points to something that like definitely didn't stand out to me at the time, but definitely looking back feels a lot more disorganized than I remember.
If you went on the eShop charts for months, Versus Super Mario Brothers was like number one. It was dominating the charts. People really wanted that stuff. But then, NSO dropped, and there wasn't much need for Versus Super Mario Brothers anymore. But it was a big
And Arcade
deal.
Archives is, I think, a just totally forgotten part of Nintendo's Switch era legacy.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually a really exciting way to make sure that these games are accessible, and even if it is similar versions for games like Super Mario Bros. And Versus Super Mario Bros., having they are different games accessible on the same system is great and exciting. But they also haven't put out an Arcade Archives Nintendo game in years at this point, and the games are frankly a little bit more expensive than most people are willing to pay for just an arcade quote-unquote port of an NES game. And so what I really hope they do eventually, because I don't want the Arcade Archives element of Switch to be lost to time, just make an Arcade Archives online app, add the expansion pass, have a launcher like they have for all the other systems, and you can play and try the games, because there's quite a few Arcade Archives games, but who is buying Arcade Archives Donkey Kong Jr.? That game is worthless to 99.999% of the human population. And so I just think that there's a better way to handle this. And I think you're right, Charlie, the disorganization and the sort of dissonance between very similar versions of the games being released in totally separate ways, and then NSO becoming the dominant version and Arcade Archives just being completely forgotten about. They haven't referenced it officially in years, as far as I know, and it's been years since they've released a new game. I hope that is not completely lost, because that almost feels to me like the way that people look back at very fondly on the weirder consoles that were on Wii U Virtual Console and be like, man, it's so unfortunate that we don't... It's so unfortunate we don't have TurboGrafx 16 games accessible on Switch. You can kind of see maybe that forming in a couple years if Switch's eShop goes down and suddenly all the Arcade Archives games are lost. Because it's a great thing that they did, but it's something they clearly did not put enough focus or effort into to make sure people were aware of it and made it accessible. Because if you wanted to buy all those games, it's going to cost you $100 or something, and that's just not just not really worth it for most people. Anyway, there's the Arcade Archive segment of this episode.
Yeah, there's nothing more to say about that, really. But I think, not to get too off topic, but it kind of gets into why they went with NSO in the first place. Because if you looked at 3DS and Wii U charts, it was always Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, but there's never the other stuff. And I think that's kind of why they went with this route. And I think it's worked for them. They've got like 40 million subscribers now, and obviously it would be nice if you could buy these games individually, but it's clear why they've gone the direction they have.
Yeah, totally.
Did either of y'all play anything like super religiously when NSO first came out?
I finished Zelda 2 for the first time.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So yeah, that was always something I thought I didn't like, but then I stuck with it and abused save states, and I eventually finished it and had a really good time.
I thought save states were there at launch. Rewind, I think, was added a little bit later.
Rewind came later. That's right.
Rewind is... Yeah. I use a lot of Rewind when I play NSO, and I am not ashamed to say that. But again, I do think that even with NSO launching with save states and the ability to play online, even though you're right, John, these aren't the games you really want to play online, frankly. It's something that shows that there was actually a good amount of effort put into NSO as its own thing that has its own value, because being able to play these games with a Joy-Con that's an NES controller with your friends online and use save states and use Rewind, it may not have launched in a way that was shaky in terms of a limited library and shifting to a page structure, but I think that page structure, for me, was more a setting the groundwork for what would become, I think, a very, very definitive service as it is now, that has these options to play the games in a more modern context online with friends, and with save states and all of that, which I think which can't be really understated.
And with Smash, you had to buy NSO. Like it was an online
Yeah.
gateway. It
And
always has
could
been.
you trade
but
Pokemon and Let's Go with that NSO? I don't know. I mean, I had NSO since day one, so I don't. Yeah,
I don't think
so
you
that's
could.
2 major games. And what's interesting is
Yeah.
it would have been weird/bad timing if they had done this just before Mario Party, if Super Mario Party had online. But let's remember, Super Mario Party did not get online until 2021, early 2021.
Yeah, it was like 3 or 4 years later or something like that.
But it is very interesting that this launches, and obviously this is intentional, but right before trading Pokemon and playing Smash Online. I mean, those are probably the 2, outside of like Splatoon, the 2 definitive reasons people play online on Nintendo system. So they had the perfect timing there.
Can we shout out the DLC this year too?
Yeah.
Because there was some cool bits. One thing I don't think that's noted here is Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle
Yeah.
Donkey Kong Adventure.
Oh, so good.
Which was a really
yeah.
good game.
Mhm.
Both that and Xenoblade Torna were basically their own little side games, like their own little campaigns.
Octo Expansion.
I guess Octo
too.
Expansion
Yeah,
was
Octo
as well.
Expansions
Yeah.
that year. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they all did a great job of just kind of feeling like an extension of the previous year. It wasn't like just more content. These were very different games. Like Donkey Kong Adventure focused on different characters and different ways to move around. Torna had its whole new area, whole new story, and then Octo Expansion was a big twist on single-player Splatoon. Like,
Yeah.
these were all worthy of being the mainstays of this year in their own right, even if they
Well,
are
what's
just
interesting
DLC.
about those games, the expansions, is that to this point, Nintendo's DLC had been much more in the vein of Smash 4 and Mario Kart 8, that is just post-launch support. Mario Maker, Splatoon 2. They had all had DLC in the pay to buy a couple courses or buy a character or whatever. But correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there had been like a specific like major expansion for a DLC for a Nintendo game previous to this
Not
year.
really. Yeah, I guess like Mario Kart 8 on Wii U had
Yeah.
DLC courses. That's probably the biggest example, but yeah, they didn't really dabble in DLC that much.
And Smash.
Well,
4.
no. But what I'm saying is
Smash 4.
those are definitely a different kind of DLC than an expansion.
Yeah, it's not like
that
single
is
player.
basically
Right.
its
Yeah.
own game at a certain point. And obviously, that's something that's continued quite significantly through the course of the Switch's life cycle. The Fire Emblem games have had major, ostensibly standalone expansions. Xenoblade 3 had one. The Pokemon DLCs are just totally new areas with new.
They're basically the third version.
And this started in 2018, and so I have of those I've only played Octo Expansion, and it's a hot take, but I do not like Octo Expansion at all.
Man,
I know
Octo
a lot of
Expansion.
people do. I just found it incredibly
Wait,
frustrating.
Tucker's a DLC.
I don't
hater.
play DLC in general, but but no, I did. But I think that especially for the time. I mean, I don't remember this, but I can very easily. I'm a very empathetic person. I'm an empath, so I can kind of understand. I like
Yeah, you're
in 2018, coming off of
God damn.
very, DLC from other Nintendo games being very different, and then this year, like, oh wait, Octo Expansion and Torna and this Mario and Rabbids thing are basically their own games. It's a pretty major step up, and certainly what has shaped the direction that Nintendo has taken DLC in the years following.
What was Champions Ballad? Was that the previous year, or was that this year too?
That was.
If it was,
I
it's
think
not
it
really
was-
worth mentioning.
Yeah,
but-
when did Champions Ballad come out?
I think that was 2018 because wasn't that a Game Awards announcement? 2017.
Well, they
Okay,
announced it
yeah.
in the 2017 Direct, with Aonuma kind of standing there with
There
the
were two
shield and
parts
the
to it.
Master Sword, and he's like, "Hey, and here's what's next."
Yeah, there was one that had like the
Yeah.
Trial of the Sword, which was pretty fun,
Yes.
and then the Champions Ballad, which was like we actually bought it for, came later. I want to say that was that.
Yeah.
That was 2018.
Yeah, which I mean, I bought it, but I think I played like a tiny bit of it. I was done with Breath of the Wild by that point, but
It's good. It's like it has a new dungeon, there's new shrines, but it's not as big as Torna or Auto Expansion or Mario and Rabbids. It's fine.
let's see what else we got here. Look, there are 2 more things I want to talk about for 2018 because we've kind of covered a lot of the bases for this year, but there are still Nintendo Labo and Pokemon for this year. Which one do we want to start with?
Labo.
Yeah.
Should we go Labo?
Yeah, I think so. So Nintendo Labo, John, as someone who was professionally covering Nintendo at the time, Nintendo Labo is something that is obviously very different. It was announced in a weird way. It had a strange rollout. It had strange trailers. It's obviously just totally unique. What was your thought process at the time? Do you remember this game being announced? Do you remember what did you do with it coming out? I'm sure you built it and covered it and all that.
They teased it like
They
Eminem,
did, yes.
kinda, where it's this weird cardboard
right.
tease and they didn't say what it was.
I think they like 24 hours. They
was bizarre.
post the actual trailer. They're like, "Hey, tomorrow morning we're
Yeah.
gonna show you a new game," and it's like this mechanical cardboard crap.
There was some hype over it though.
I was very
there was a lot of
excited.
people weirded out, but many others were like, "This is actually kind of cool."
I sent the trailer
And
to my
I think
parents
it
and was like,
showed-
"Hey, video games are so cool. You should buy me this." I never got it, but
Yeah. I mean, it showed that the Switch was
Yeah.
really flexible, right? Because that Joy-Con with the IR camera, the right one, no one knew what that did. Like, you could eat a sandwich in 1-2 Switch. I think you could reload in Revelations 2. But it didn't
Yeah.
really have a function. And all of a sudden, Labo used it for measuring the distance of strings to make
Yeah.
all of this functional. And so you got like a piano, you got a fishing rod. It was
Yeah.
cool technology. And I stand by Labo VR actually being really good, that software. That wasn't this year,
No, yeah.
but I think
there
that
were
was a really
3
good one.
Labo toy
And the
kits,
variety kit
Toy-Con
was-
kits in 2018, which was the Variety Kit and Robot Kit, which both launched. Hold on, if only someone had made a list.
4/20,
April
2018.
April 20th. They launched on 4/20 actually. The Variety Kit and the Robot
Yep.
Kit, and then later in the year we got the
Same day as God of War.
Oh, what
by the
funny.
way.
The Labo
That's so
Vehicle
funny.
Kit launched in September, and then you're right, it wasn't until 2019 that we would get the VR kit. But 3 kits in 1 year.
Robot Kit was interesting in that it finally fulfilled the Project Robot tech demo
Crazy.
from Wii U.
That's right.
And that was there throughout the entire lifespan, and it just showed up in this cardboard game. That was probably the worst Labo as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that wasn't much good. But Variety Kit and Vehicle Kit, I thought were both pretty cool. Variety Kit had a lot of cool gimmicks. I thought the piano was neat. I don't know if there's anything more than neat, but it was cool. And then the Vehicle Kit was like an open world sandbox. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, really? I
But-
didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, but neither really come close to how well made the software was in VR. But yeah, it was a weird surprise, and I think it just showed the Switch to be more than console handheld, and became this weird flexible thing that could do pretty much anything they
Yeah.
wanted it to do, which then Ring Fit also fulfilled.
No, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
Not that
yeah,
year.
come down
but
the line. Yeah. I think that Labo is still maybe the most interesting use of video game technology of the last decade. I think the fact that they came up with this, put it into full production, were able to manufacture a bunch of different uses for this technology in terms of using the HD rumble and using the IR camera and using the fact that you have 2 Joy-Cons that have separate gyroscopes so that you can move them around separately. They had just the weirdest shit in here. One of the things you built was a swan. You built an elephant. Like they went crazy with this stuff. And of course, I think the most iconic ones are things like the steering wheel and the piano and the fishing rod. But I like that they really stepped outside of. I mean, they made it with the box. They said we're not thinking outside the box. Screw it, we're using the box.
They actually work. They're really
Yeah.
tactile. The piano, you press a key and it just responds as you'd expect it to do. Like I don't want to keep talking about the VR one because that wasn't this year, but the blaster has this really cool tactile feedback. When you push the trigger, you just sort of feel the pump action.
Whoa.
It's so neat that they can make like these very specific controllers for these games and just have them out of cardboard and somehow feel good. The steering wheel felt really good too. Like you'd think that it would be this weird sort of delay, but no, like it's instant. You start steering left and your car steers left.
Have you ever played Labo, Charlie? Any thoughts?
The day that I came out, I took a walk in the woods and then went home and built it. And I did not touch it after that. I think my sister broke some of it too, so I wasn't able to fully complete it. But no, I mean, I don't know. I think it's really fun for what it is, and I didn't get to fully experience it because it was broken pretty soon after I built it, and did not feel like spending another $80. But I don't know. We talk sometimes, especially discussing the Switch era at large, about how Nintendo sometimes doesn't always have the most personality compared to other eras, right? I mean, that's what a lot of like last week's episode about the Wii U was, right? And to see the Labo just be what it is, I think it exemplifies a spark of personality from Nintendo that we see within its games, obviously, but not so much within things that are UI level or experientially aligned that aren't a video game necessarily. There's no shop music, right? But like the Labo being what it is and the software working the way that it does, I think is the rare example of something that is so pared back from what a standard game experience is. You get to see Nintendo's personality shine through in a way that isn't always visible, especially during the Switch.
And what's interesting about Labo is I think it's like an all-encompassing creative software in that, okay, you're using cardboard. Oh, okay, we get it. That's the basic thing. But like when you boot up the game, I like how distinct Labo is. First blush, a big box, big cardboard sheets. That's kind of cool. The game cases have black spines and a black logo in the corner, which is bizarre but really cool. And as far as I know, the only time they've ever done an alternate color scheme for a Switch case, which obviously they used to do with red cases and yellow cases and gold cartridges and things. But Labo is the only one continuing that legacy. But then you pop in the cartridge and it has this really cool software that's kind of like an interactive Lego kit instruction thing that you can mess with to show, oh, this is how you fold it. And you can move the 3D models around step by step, and it has this really clean UI and this fun music, and it's presented through. I forgot this until yesterday. I was doing a little research. There are Labo characters. There's a set of characters that like talk to one another and like teach each other things to like have it be sort of a Nintendo-fied way to learn how to build and be creative. And I just love the attention to detail that went into it. I the only Labo I ever used was the VR one, and I only ever built one of the VR ones, which was the blaster, and it gave me massive nausea, so I never built any other ones. And and the box is still like in my closet collecting dust with unbuilt future Labo projects. But I always, from what I saw of it and what I knew of it, and then what I experienced of it with the VR kit the next year, I've always maintained that Labo is nowhere near my favorite thing that Nintendo has done this generation, but I think it might be their coolest thing that they've done, and it'll be really interesting to see if they continue that 1-2 switch Labo Ring Fit energy going forward, because there's a group of these EPD4 games that are just totally off the wall, and Labo is easily the most off of the wall one of these games.
Yeah, I really hope it continues, because no one else does this. No one else in the industry is trying to make these controllers do things that you've never seen.
Nintendo does what everyone else does.
Most developers, exactly, yeah. And not every Labo kit was a hit, but some of them were just genuinely genius. So I look back on it quite fondly.
And then the last topic that I have before we get into Friend Coded is Pokemon in 2018, because this was the year that Pokemon came to home consoles in a significant way. And there were two games. One of them was lightly mentioned earlier that released from the Pokemon Company in 2018, which was, well, I guess 3 games if you want to be a semantic Samuel about it. But Pokemon Quest, Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, and Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu. And this trio of games is very, very interesting because people forget, and I don't, there's no reason for them to remember this, so I don't blame them for it. People forget that Pokemon Quest is the first original Pokemon game on Nintendo Switch, which is crazy.
It's also the first spin-off made by
they developed that game in-house. What's up with that?
Really?
Yeah. And you wouldn't know. It's nothing special.
That game is bizarre. And actually, these games combined were bizarre because guess what I spent my morning doing? Rewatching the 2018 Pokemon press conference in which they announced these games. And they spent 20 minutes talking about Pokemon Quest. What the heck is up with that? But we've lost these press conferences as the generation has gone on. But Nintendo obviously did one in January of 2017, but then Pokemon Company did them in 2018 and 2019. And it's very, very interesting and feels so different to look back and be like, the major Pokemon release, the first home console RPG Pokemon title in Pokemon Let's Go was not announced in a Pokemon Presents, a Pokemon Showcase, Pokemon Direct. You know, it has different names over the years. It was announced with Junichi Masuda on stage being like, please take a look at this, to a crowd of people. Yeah. And I love that Let's Go trailer. I like Let's Go. It's not one of my favorite games, but everything about how that game was announced and then ended up coming out and then reflects Switch hardware and reflects the era in which it's also connecting to Pokemon Go, and it's about motion controls, and it's about also co-op because you can do two Joy-Con. Let's Go is a perfect example of early Switch era hardware and software and trying different things, technology, that is really, really fascinating to talk about.
It's interesting today, Let's Go, because when it came out, there was a division around the art style where it's just like, this is just a 3DS game.
Let's Go's the best looking Pokemon game on Switch.
Now, people are like, it's like, yeah, it genuinely is. It looks great. It's clean, it's beautiful, it's not pushing any boundaries, but it's very pleasant to look at. And the music too, a very underrated part of that game. They orchestrated the entire soundtrack, which they haven't done since for some ungodly reason. I think they've stuck with MIDI for all the other games, but this one sounds glorious. And it doesn't really have online. Like, you have to use codes to get into people. You can't just sort of do like global trading and everything like that. And it's not like a full longevity Pokemon, but I think it's a fun little romp.
It is, and you know, I think talking about the stuff like the soundtrack, there is a sense that like people maybe in the Pokemon fandom might not have gotten exactly what they wanted in terms of a remake that pays reference and homage to what these games originally were and their impact and importance. But I think in the ways that matter, it certainly was. I mean, whether it's the soundtrack or the visuals or just making sure that like the region of Kanto like looks the way it does, right? They wanted it to feel right. And I think that might be why some of the gameplay stuff might have fallen to the wayside. Did either of y'all get the Pokeball Plus?
I did. And let me tell you, I played the entire game with it. I loved that thing. And I honestly think that it made my experience with that game so much more interesting because it's a weird-ass controller, but hey, it works really well for its intended purpose. And the fact that it is a Pokeball. Exactly. But it's a Pokeball. There's two buttons and a joystick, which is all you need for Let's Go because it's a very simplified and stripped down game, which I think is a pro and a con in some ways. But the fact that the joystick is the Pokeball button is awesome. And then there's this like hidden button that's kind of soft on the top of it. And I love pressing that little thing.
What was really cool about Let's Go as well is it's the first game in the series to get rid of random encounters. It became a mainstay after that. And you could ride on any Pokemon. Like some of them would even fly in the sky, and like you can fly over load zones.
Yeah.
You can like ride on the back of really fast Pokemon. Some of them would just be really slow and dwell behind you.
You could grab onto Snorlax's
There was a lot of love in that game.
They're really Let's Go is a game that I have immense reverence for in the way that it pushes Pokemon forward. I think it also is a step back in some ways, and of course, that's Pokemon, baby. If you have ever played Pokemon generation to generation, you know that's exactly how it goes. There's some good, there's some bad. They take some steps forward, they take some steps back. But this is a really specific example of Pokemon, the mainline Pokemon games up to this point, especially through Gen 6 and then into Gen 7, people were like, man, this formula is getting stale. They're barely reinventing things. There were a few things in Gen 7 that people, and myself included, really liked that sort of broke out of that mold. But Let's Go in getting rid of random encounters, bringing back ride Pokemon in a much more significant way, tying it into Pokemon Go, having co-op battles, changing the way that that random encounter or that wild battles work. I love the fact that you do not have to battle wild Pokemon. I adore that. It incentivizes catching. I like the fact that catching is now a more in-depth mechanic than just pressing the button and hoping to God it gets caught. There's so many steps that they took forward here that I remember watching that reveal trailer, which I recommend everyone here go back and rewatch. It has this awesome like vocal track building behind it, and they intercut between all these things. I watched that trailer so many times. It's not even funny how many times I've watched the Let's Go reveal trailer.
I remember the music being really good for that trailer.
It's really good. But I also think that in some ways, the reason why it's even though I think it's the most interesting, maybe I have to think a little more of that. It's my least favorite of the Switch era Pokemon games. Is that those steps back in terms of the battle system being very, very basic, and my biggest complaint with the game in locking to Kanto and Kanto almost only, but not really, in the Pokedex. You don't even have Pichu. Pikachu and Raichu are in the game. You can't get Pichu. You can't evolve Eevee into Espeon. You can't evolve Rhyhorn into Rhyperior. There is so much stuff that would have made total sense and would have been very easy for them to include, but they kept it down to that 151. Except for not really, because also there's a Lowland Pokemon that you can get for trading. And also there's Meltan and Melmetal, which you can get from Pokemon Go. And so it's just a weird mishmash of like, okay, we're going to let things slide here. But the areas where it would make sense to have things be expanded, we're not going to do that. And the map is mostly the same, except for there's a couple areas where it's a little bit different. And the characters are mostly the same, except for there's like a character from Alola, like one of the gym challengers. Yeah, the paint woman. Yeah, I can't remember her name.
Yeah.
Like, it's just it's here and there and here and there, and I'm like, I can't quite tell how I feel about this game.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate it more with time. In the moment, I thought it was a bit basic. I thought the battle system was a bit meh, and I always enjoyed it, but I didn't really think about it much more than that. But I look back on it more fondly these days. Like, there's a lot of charm in there, and now that we've actually had like a full-fledged mainline game with, like proper multiplayer and just more longevity to it, I think I can respect Let's Go
and it's
more.
what kicked off Pokemon's most experimental era of all time. I mean, you can levy criticisms at each of the games they've released this generation, but you can't say that they haven't been trying new shit, which is what they hadn't been doing for 25 years up until that point. And now every Pokemon game on Switch plays and looks entirely different, which I think is really, really awesome. And Let's Go is what started that. Okay, well, I just had to get that off my chest. I've been wanting to express my thoughts about Let's Go for a while, but I think we've covered just about everything that comes into Nintendo's 2018. Is there any other things that you guys want to talk about before we switch to the community?
We've been talking for a while. I'll just name some names that we didn't even talk about Super Mario Party that much, Octopath that much either, or a few other ones. But there are other games in this year.
Go Vacation.
It'll go forever if we mention everything.
Well, that means it's time for...
Do you want to take some from the
Friend
Discord?
Coded? Yes, I have plenty of responses. Godspeed to the Backlog Banter community, who I messaged about 30 minutes before we recorded. Like, guys, I'm sorry. We forgot. We have a new system in place. We're not going to forget going into the future. But we actually have quite a few. The first one comes from Andrew Orozco of My Star Wars Show fame, who says... one of the most overlooked Switch gems of 2018 wasn't console exclusive, but Valkyria Chronicles 4 was fantastic. A great SRPG representation on the handheld console hybrid front. Beautiful art style, smooth gameplay, and terrific combat scenarios, a must-have for tactical enthusiasts. Now, he puts this in quotes. I guess he's quoting himself. I don't know why he put that in quotes. But have either of you played Valkyria Chronicles 4?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. The series stayed in Japan for a long time too. So this was the first one we got for like a decade. It didn't really evolve that much from the PS3 game from my memory, but that's fine because the PS3 game was great. It's just kind of more of that. Really good time with that one.
We also have one from Phil the Pill, who says, I think 2018 was low-key a subtle foundational year for the Switch. You don't have a lot of huge first-party headliners, but the third-party support was pretty amazing, indicating the Switch would not suffer from the same problems of the Wii U. 2018 saw the release of Minecraft, owned by Microsoft, on the system, establishing that Nintendo had built an intuitive platform for a gaming audience that reached beyond the core Nintendo fandom. 2018 also saw the release of Octopath Traveler by Square Enix, initially exclusive to the Switch, though of course that has changed over the years, and access to some classic franchises from Capcom, Sega, and Natsume. It really clicked for me in 2018 that Switch was giving me access to almost as much gaming content as Steam had. Yeah, I think that's a great encapsulation. I forgot that it took until 2018 for Minecraft to hit Switch.
So did I.
And it was a fairly big deal too, because not that long after, Microsoft and Nintendo started doing crossplay, and PlayStation were not on board at that point.
That's right.
Whereas now it's like it's the norm for like Fortnite and Rocket League and all that to have crossplay, but Minecraft kind of pushed for that with
There's
Nintendo and
a
Xbox.
video essay script waiting in the wings to be written about the evolution of crossplay in like the mid 2010s.
Yeah.
Do you have any from Twitter,
like
Charlie?
Yeah, I've got plenty. Joe Richards at Scrufftail says, in terms of 2018 games, it was a super strong year for DLC. Octo Expansion was a highlight, and I'm a sucker for Splatoon single player, and that campaign was incredible. Celeste is an easy candidate for huge indies that thrived on Switch, and the return of The World Ends With You as well. Like, the DLC stuff, again, like, Tucker has made this place not a safe space for DLC discussion. I really couldn't agree more. I mean, Octo Expansion is kind of the thing that paved the way for Splatoon 3 to also kick as much ass as it does, because that is like maybe in my opinion, Nintendo's best campaign of the Switch era that came after 2017, aside from from Tears of the Kingdom, maybe, I think, which is a very like strict caveat, but I really do think it's up there as one of the best, and Octo Expansion is not far behind.
2 single player was just kind of more of the same of the first one, and Octo Expansion was like, oh, this is the new thing. This is something new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very innovative, and like the way that they included the subway stations and like letting you choose your weapons and stuff. It showed that like one of the greatest things about Breath of the Wild and a lot of and Mario Odyssey as well is the freedom of solving the problems, right? There is a way that the game wants you to do it, and then there are 30 to 40 different ways that you can solve it if you want to and want to just like toy around with these game systems. And Splatoon doesn't, in its structure and level design and mechanics, doesn't always allow for that. And so instead, giving players different ways to express themselves by choosing different weapons, I think is very, very cool and a very smart way of accommodating that and encouraging just play, you know?
Yeah, and you can skip levels if you need to, and then go to something else if it's too hard. And so, yeah, I don't like Octo Expansion, but I appreciate those elements of it. Can we meet in the middle? Can we do a little handshake, extend the olive branch?
I'll think about it.
We also have one. Oh, wait. I apologize. I forgot that. So apparently, Andrew was telling me while I was reading Phil's message, I was supposed to make the Switch snap with my fingers. When I said it really clicked for me. So I'm going to go back and do that. It really clicked for me in 2018 that Switch was giving me access to almost as much gaming content as Steam had. I apologize. I hope this makes up for my grave error. We also have one from Adam Hurd who says, a cursory glimpse at the game launches. We had one single original title in Smash and the utterly bizarre Labo project. Outside, well, okay. All right, buddy. There's some other games in there. But outside of that, it was almost entirely ports like Tropical Freeze and Bayonetta or remakes like Pokemon Let's Go, Pikachu, and Eevee. Though Let's Go is actually interesting. It is a remake, but I would consider those basically original games with how much they change things. It's really just a map that's the same. So that's a conversation for another day. He also continues and says, the Switch also had a bunch of weird ports like Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition and Resident Evil 7's Cloud version and Night Trap.
Night Trap.
Was that year?
That's crazy.
Whoa.
Incredible.
And he says, ultimately, after a stellar launch in 2017, 2018 kind of did nothing to capitalize on the incredible first year until December 2018's big Christmas smash. All while the 3DS had its last hurrah at the Switch's expense. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, 3DS was still getting games.
Yep.
Yeah.
A couple of the games that came out this year came out on Switch and 3DS. You know, we talked about Sushi Striker,
Captain Toad, too.
Right.
Captain Toad also ported to 3DS. Let's make sure to remind people of that.
Version. Yeah, New Donk City is on 3DS.
Do you have any other ones you want to read out, Charlie?
Plenty. Another one here on Twitter from Kevin Kenson. Not my favorite year personally, but there was definitely some great stuff.
Friend of the show, Kevin Kenson.
Friend of the show. Pokemon Let's Go was pure nostalgia joy for me. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Octopath Traveler, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Torna were all wonderful, and Hollow Knight made its console debut. Where's your Hollow Knight?
I'm sure that got a physical release, but believe it or not, I do not have the physical release for Hollow Knight. I apologize.
Shameful. Joseph Stanichar says, Celeste, my girlfriend is playing through it for the first time on Switch now, and they're also loving it. And, like, I know we mentioned it, but, like, Celeste is, like, one of the best games of all time.
Love that
game is so amazing.
You want to talk about a soundtrack? Woo, dog.
Oh yeah. It's kind of nuts that we haven't talked about that game much at all, but it's genuinely the highlight of the year. I'd put it ahead of Smash in many ways.
Yeah.
It's just, if you haven't played Celeste, you haven't lived.
Yeah, I remember. Do you guys remember when that game first came out and it got just the deluge of? I guess John, you were kind of on the other side of this one. You were part of the deluge, I would assume. But I mean, I remember. I think this was kind of the first time that I was following video games, and there was an indie hit on this level where I was like, oh, like the people who cover video games are giving this game attention, and they're giving it universally almost
Perfect scores.
like exclusively positive feedback. And that was kind of the first time where I was really following video games, and there was an indie game specifically that came out that hit that. And the feeling of excitement that I had was just so strong. And then I played it all the way through in one sitting on a sick day or something like that. It was just amazing. I love that game so much.
Yeah, it was incredible. You're right though. Before that, there were only a couple. It's a handful of games that really broke the mold of the indie scene. This is something that everyone was playing, and rightfully so. And I think without Celeste, we probably wouldn't have the same spotlight on indie games the way we do now. It kind of made people take them more seriously.
And while we're on this topic, another all-time great indie game that came out very soon after Celeste actually was Into the Breach. Another game that universally beloved, probably one of, if not the best game in its genre, just all killer, no filler in a way that I think a lot of games in that genre sometimes fail to be. But yeah, just again, such a great year for indies.
A couple of those to mention, actually. I'm just looking at a list of 2018 games, and most of these were on Switch. If not, were brought to Switch later. I apologize if some of these weren't ported until a later year, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Grease came out that year. I love Grease. That game is phenomenal. Return of the Obra Dinn. That's a great game. The Messenger. Dead Cells. Donut County. So Overcooked 2. There's a lot of really, really good smaller stuff that came out this year. And a lot of those, I mean, The Messenger, Dead Cells, Obra Dinn, Celeste. I mean, these are some of the most praised games of that year, which is really cool that they're standing toe-to-toe in terms of conversation and still memory to this day alongside Red Dead Redemption 2 and God of War and Smash Ultimate and Spider-Man. 2018, I think, is a really balanced year in terms of big games and small games, keeping toe-to-toe with each other, which I think is really, really fun. And I actually think we're in the midst of one of those right now. Because, I mean, a good chunk of, the most praised games of this year are games developed by, 3 or 4 people. And so, it's really, really fun.
A couple more friend-coded takes from Twitter. Jackie G, at Jack of the G's, actually responds with a gif of what looks like the guy from The Messenger hitting the gray, which is really quite exceptional to look at. We've got Corey Cooper at Metroid Freak 21. Freak is capitalized, by the way, so it's Metroid Freak. He just responds with an image of the box of Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus on Switch, which, come on. And then last one, Jake Steinberg at Jake Knows It says OP year with an image of the splash arts for Celeste and Smash Ultimate. And I really couldn't agree more. I think those two are two of my favorite games of all time.
And definitely two of the definitive games of that year,
Yeah. So after reflecting on all these games, do you still sort of view this year as middling?
One last one. Abram, actually, we're going to end on Abram Buter, who actually doesn't submit very often. So Godspeed. He's working upstairs. Hard at work on Lost and Cult. Get those deals signed, those books written. He says, well, I have many thoughts on 2018 overall. I want to specifically focus on Mario Tennis Aces because John is on with you. Now, I would like to note that it pains me to speak about Mario at the present moment. I have to because John is, in my opinion, the Mario Tennis Aces fan, and obviously he he expressed that today. He said, Abram says, I was extremely excited for the game myself, as it felt like the year's first new title of consequence. (Parentheses. I liked Kirby Star Allies, fine, but it wasn't really inventing the wheel by any stretch. But when I got Aces, I couldn't escape this gnawing disappointment at how bare bones it felt. It was not at the level of my favorite Mario sports games to that point, titles like Mario Super Sluggers. It got there in the end with all the post-launch updates, but I would indeed consider Mario Tennis Aces to be my favorite Mario sports title at this point. But not even the exquisite core gameplay couldn't buoy my opinion upon release. I was a greedy boy and needed more than what was on the cart day one. And here's an addendum here to his favorite Mario sports game things. Again, I would really like to stress that I don't enjoy talking about the Mario universe with this degree of articulation post-Wonder due to the plumber's reign over the release calendar. And I've retroactively changed my favorite Switch game from Wonder to Pikmin 4 in an attempt to distance myself from him. But I must make an exception for the sake of your discussion.
It's cool that the opinion turned around, though. Like, most people make their opinion, and then that's it. They don't come back afterwards, and it's neat that you can see that shift.
Definitely. Yeah, and Aces, I think, is one of the definitive examples of that. I mean, there's certainly other games that fall in that vein in the Switch era of getting post-launch support. I think Star Allies somewhat redeemed itself in the eyes of the hardcore Kirby community, but Aces is certainly the Mario sports game on Switch that has had the biggest turnaround. Both Super Rush and Battle League do not share that same grace.
Battle League never bounced back.
But Godspeed to Mario Tennis Aces. Camelot's probably working on another one of those for like maybe next year. Maybe.
Yeah, probably.
Sorry, what were you saying, John? Oh, you were asking me something.
Yeah, I was saying, like, after reflecting all these games, like, does your opinion still sort of fall in like a middling kind of area, or have you changed?
It depends on if we're talking about. Well, obviously, we're talking about here Switch's 2018 versus 2018 as a whole. I think talking about what came to the industry that year, from the biggest AAA titles from Sony and Ubisoft and places like that, to the more variety of high-profile smaller titles, I think it is a great year on the whole with a bunch of games that I really like. But the truth of the matter is, especially at that time, there were very few games that I loved that I played on my Nintendo Switch. I played Grease there, I played Smash there, obviously, and I played Celeste there, and those are three games that I absolutely adore. But especially for me, it's especially the lack of Nintendo published or developed games that I love from this year that keeps it back for me. Not in that it was a bad year, but it keeps it back from. I think this is my least favorite year for Switch. And again, it's not bad, but I'm used to that variety, the handful of games, if not more, that I absolutely adore. And 2018 was we've spent a lot of time praising it, but we've also spent a lot of time talking about how their focus was in weird places, and it's clear that they kind of blew their load in 2017 and then had to spend till the end of 2018 sort of catching up to that momentum, which I would say continued into 2019. And then has had a couple of dips here and there, of course, the Switch generation, but that's life, baby. But I think that 2018 stands out specifically because the end of the Wii U into Switch having such a great 2018 feels more like a Wii U year than almost any other Switch year, in that there's a couple of big releases. It's mostly more niche stuff that didn't sell very well. Okay, there's some ports and some remakes and stuff. 2018 is a year that doesn't exemplify Switch in my mind, which is why I came out of the gate saying I'm pretty underwhelmed or disappointed in it. Looking back, even if it's like a B tier year, that's compared to mostly A tier and S tier other years, and so it's like you got to grade on a curve. That's
a good way of putting it. Yeah, because I 100% agree. It's probably the worst Switch year. I think there's still a lot of good in there. And if you explored outside Nintendo, then there's always something to play, especially from indies and all those ports that came out this year. But you're right. You know, it didn't have that many big hitters, and the ones that did hit were right at the end of the year. So it was a long way
to the point where
them.
Smash wasn't nominated for Game of the Year till the next year.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm in the same boat as you guys. I think for me, Tropical Freeze, this was the first place I played that. Smash Ultimate, I'm a competitive Smash player. That's always going to be my number one priority on any Nintendo console. And not to mention just the amount of games that are like specifically like personal favorites, like again, Into the Breach, Celeste, Smash, Wolfenstein 2. Those are all like games that are in my top 10, top 20.
Sure.
And, for me, I think I do put this maybe above a 2019 and a 2020 and maybe even a 2021.
Well, get to there.
But I really do like love this year. And also like, I just have so many good memories of kind of like all the Smash hype was happening right after I graduated from high school, right? Like so many different things were happening in my life personally that it's kind of hard to divorce some of that nostalgia from between like where I was at in my life.
This is a Nintendo Switch retrospective and nostalgia podcast.
You know what I mean?
So
that's right.
If there's a place to do it, it's here.
That was the year I hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That was like back in the day when I was like
2024
doing
is that year
stuff
for
regularly. Hell yeah, that's right. But yeah, I don't know. It was just like that era for me is like very, very, again, it's very personal, more so than I think any other year on this list, aside from 2017 maybe.
Totally.
But.
Well, I think that about does it here on the Nintendo Select podcast. Joined, of course, by Jon Cartwright, who's able to give us his glowing insight into the year that was 2018. Of course, we are planning more guests, more episodes, and we are also planning on continuing this series to where eventually we will have reviewed in specific, in long-form conversation, every year of the Nintendo Switch. And down the line, our goal is to have a video that is discussing and ranking all of the years, which will be very fun. Of course, it's going to take a while to get there. But Jon, thank you very much for joining us here to talk about 2018. I feel like we got so into the nitty-gritty of so many different areas. There's like very few stones left unturned here.
We didn't talk about Yoku.
That's a great game. I love that game.
True.
Yeah. I still listen to a couple songs from that soundtrack.
2018 was insane for indies. That shit. Oh, goddamn.
But thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun to reflect on, and I can't wait to tune in to the future episodes because there's a lot more. This has been a long system with a lot of highs and lows.
That's right. Yeah, Nintendo's longest running as of this week.
Congratulations, Nintendo Switch.
Or last week.
Nintendo Switch had an interesting week in the past since we recorded last. It passed that milestone, and also we got a new Famicom Detective Club game announced. But of course, thank you very much, everyone, for watching here. If you are coming from the Good Vibes Gaming community, if somehow, God forbid, Jon shares this with some people that he knows, welcome. Hope you enjoyed our conversation here. And also remember the friend-coded segment. If you want to be read out on this podcast in the future, you can reply. Reply to the comments that Charlie and I make on my Discord server, which is linked in the description, or his Twitter account, which he posted out in there, because we really enjoy having our community feedback and seeing that we're not the only ones who are this much of sickos about this stuff. Goodbye.
All right.
Thank you very much, everyone, for listening.